Rockhound here. So it's been a little while since my last video about Mavericks Proving Grounds, the reason being that the game's founders like myself are still under a non-disclosure agreement, so we can't share any gameplay or details about the game's testing phase known as Mavericks The Forge. However, Automaton recently released a short video alongside a post to their website outlining their first core update to Mavericks The Forge, which is known as Hunter and Hunted. I'm going to take a close look at a few features that we can see in the video, along with some extra images that Automaton have kindly given me access to, and then after that I have an exclusive audio interview for you that I recorded with Automaton's digital marketing manager, Chris-Malby-Tynan, where we talk specifically about Automaton's marketing so far and what their plans are for the future, as well as touching on some industry-wide marketing issues. Now, founders currently have exclusive access to the first iteration of the Hunter and Hunted update for the first week or two, and then the 100,000 players that signed up for free access during the E3 Expo last June should start to hear from the studio soon about when they can gain access to the update. Automaton have indicated that the plan is for this to be done in batches, with all of the E3 100,000 having access to the game by the end of March. There's not been any public announcement about when anyone else will gain access to the game, but we might speculate that based on founders originally being promised a month of exclusive access and that we're now well past 3 months, that it might be much later in the year before others have early access to the game. If that is the case, then it will give the devs plenty of opportunity to add many features to the game and refine gameplay based on the feedback of the current players. And Automaton have also said that they intend to have the full release of the game before the end of 2019, so I'm guessing that any open early access would happen at least a month or so before that full release occurs. Amongst other features, Hunter and Hunted brings the first proper Battle Royale game mode to the game. The current iteration being a 30-minute exploration mode where you can collect loot, kill other players, and in turn pilfer their loot and then call in an extraction to return to the island's capital hub and bank some or all of the goodies that you're carrying for later use. At the end of the 30 minutes of exploration, the game switches to the more familiar last man standing survival mode or battle royale that also lasts 30 minutes. As the name Hunter and Hunted suggests, the update brings with it several new features that will allow you to track players across the Isle of Doorn. These are blood trails, littering, footprints, and foliage displacement. This is what Lawrence Barnett, senior game designer at Automaton, had to say about these new features.
So if you cast an eye to other FPSs, other shooting games, you know, it's totally valid to ask the question of why would tracking be important. We're confident in the assumption that when you invest more, when the outcome is greater, these systems start to mean a lot more. It's not the case that you respawn and you're back in the game and you respawn and you're back in the game. There's much more investment and there's much more reward for it. It's about giving the players options that they can build strategies from, but it also does it in such a way that it's intuitive, the information. You don't need to explain to someone that a footprint means that they've been there. You don't need to explain that a blood trail means that someone's weak or they've been damaged. And littering to that effect is just as intuitive. Magazines, bullet casings. So it's a kind of complexity that's perfect to add into a game.
Based on that, I expect that it will take some time for the devs to refine how these features work, so both founders and the E3 100,000 could expect them to be working suboptimally, at least initially. Having said that, I really like the idea of having these elements in the game, and that tracking can become a valuable and learnable skill for players to help outsmart your opponent. In addition, these features could also be flipped around and be used by players to bait opponents in for an ambush, so it'll be interesting to see how that side of gameplay develops. During the Hunter and Hunted introduction video, we also see some of the studio's lead developers discussing an image of the Isle of Doorn's social hub, known as the capital. In this, we can see these circular features, which are in fact 12 separate deployment pools that players can literally jump into to provide access into the Isle of Doorn, as seen here in this concept art that Automaton have kindly provided me. The multiple pools also have offsets in time, so that you can choose to drop into one pool, which might give you 10 minutes left in the exploration phase of the game before the Battle Royale or Survival phase starts, or you can move on to the next pool, which might give you less than 5 minutes remaining in the exploration phase. With 12 pools available, this means that you'll never have to wait longer than 5 minutes before a Battle Royale session starts, if that's what you prefer, or you can have up to half an hour of looting and extracting gear depending on which pool you jump into. I'm interested to see how the social hub develops around the deployment pools, with things like a gun range and auction hall to sell your gear being incorporated into the capital. I'm also hoping that it won't feel like a chore to move between the pools if you need to find a different wait time before the survival stage starts, and I'd like to hear more from the devs about their thoughts around this as the capital develops. Okay, moving on from the capital, we get a view of a relatively new AKM gun skin. This skin is associated with the wealth-focused faction known as the Syndicate, so it's not surprising that it comes with a gold trim. We should expect to see many more gun skins, including those for other factions, as well as more elaborate versions coming into the game over the next few months, as we move into the next core update known as the Armory. Based on the name, the Armory is likely to bring in such things as armor, optics, new weapons, as well as additional gameplay mechanics. The Armory will be released over a number of themed rapid updates in the next month or two. Well, that covers some of the game info that I can talk about, but I was also lucky enough to have an extended chat with Automaton's new digital marketing manager, Chris-Malby-Tynan, last week. So let's jump into that and hear what Chris had to say. G'day Chris, thanks for taking the time to chat with me about Mavericks the Forge. First off, can you just tell us a little bit about how you came to be working for Automaton and what your role is within the studio?
No problem, Rockhand. So I am the digital marketing manager at Automaton, and I lead all of the external communications that happen from the studio. I started working there back in November, around the time of the Forge launch. Yeah, it's my first foray into the video game industry, as a professional at least. So this is a really exciting time for me, and an incredibly exciting studio for me to have joined.
Oh, that's cool. That's cool. And I guess in many ways you must have felt like you'd really jumped in the deep end, kind of being the studio's first full-time marketing manager. What were your immediate thoughts when you joined the studio about the marketing of Mavericks up until that point, and what were your initial sort of priorities moving on from that point? Sure.
So I raised it even earlier than when I first joined. In fact, when I went through the interview process and had conversations with James, community sentiment was a big issue that was clearly something that the studio needed to address. Mm-hmm. There were a number of occasions where the studio mispositioned and mispresented what we were looking to put out, and that caused issues with the community, and we needed to address that quite quickly. So community sentiment was the number one. The second one as well was to make things more formalized and have a built-up infrastructure internally, so that over the long term, as the game does mature and as we get closer to our full release later this year, we can make sure that our communication is done properly, clearly, and also done in a manner that is best for the community as well, because not everyone wants to read blog posts. In fact, a lot of the community like either audio or video, and we need to make sure that our content reflects that accordingly.
Yeah. And so the sort of first video that we've seen with some input from yourself in it was the recent Hunter and Hunted update video. And so this sort of reflects on your comments about community sentiment. Basically, the first thing you said was that you felt that founders had reacted overall positively to the Forge. Personally, I was a little bit surprised to hear you say that after the missteps in marketing and communication from last year. that you'd take a really positive view like that about founders' reactions. So I guess I'd be keen for you to go into a little bit more detail about specifically what you mean by an overall positive reaction from founders.
Yeah, no, that's very, very fair. The video itself, I could have explained myself better. Specifically, the founders that I'm talking about are the founders that have been involved and continue to be involved today. There is a small group of founders of the over 10,000 founders that we have signed up, who have bought into the mission, have seen how it's developed from day one, and are keen to see it succeed, and they have been so beneficial for us to kind of learn from. If we look at the wider founder cohort, yes, they have not overall reacted positively, and that is expected, to be honest. The studio made some mistakes. There was mispositioning and under delivery on certain key milestones, which disappointed people, especially with the change in tact from E3 and so on and so forth. But we're trying really hard to address those. And so I think I still stand by my comment in the context of what I meant. But that being said, I could have explained myself better. Yeah.
And I guess within that overall group, you could probably presume that there's some people that you might not ever see come back. And there'll be some people, I would put myself into that group of that cohort that have been actively participating and giving feedback and playing the game as often as we can. For the group that are kind of sitting on the fence a little more, is there a point that you see in the future where you think that group might change their minds?
Yeah, absolutely. So first thing to answer is you're quite right. Some founders will have been burnt by what was the state of the game when they first came in. We had a particular spike back in November, and some of those players will have opened the game and gone, "What is this? This is not what I was promised back at E3 in 2018. I'm not going to play this again," and never return and never knock on our doorstep.
Yeah.
And we are also expecting that with some of the E3 people that we're inviting as well. So this additional cohort of the first non-founder cohort that are coming into the Forge as well. If we don't position it properly, and this has been something that has been raised by so many people, especially this actual founder cohort, you included yourself correctly, absolutely, and there are others as well who have been really helpful with really raising their concerns in the best possible way. It's not a matter of them just sticking their oar in. It's because they want to see the game succeed, and we really appreciate that, and that's been something that we've really enjoyed as a studio, that community collaboration.
It's been real critical feedback, hasn't it?
Absolutely, because the thing is that without that, we can't make the game develop in the right way, and might as well have done a standard development model where we didn't include the audience for the public for another 3 years before the game was finally finished. And that's why we've changed it. So what we have gathered has been really beneficial from those people, but if we don't position it properly, we will continue to burn people, because they will just see the game, go, "This isn't ready, I'm going to go and play something else, I'm going to go play PUBG or something else," and then never darken our doorstep again. That being said, the game is coming on leaps and bounds, and I believe that by the time that we get to another core update, so our next core update is the Armory, which will be coming out between March and the end of April, and even beyond that, as we get to E3 as well, that is when we're going to start to see the core fundamental baseline of the game with the proper feedback loops and the key systems that people are going to go, yeah, this is a really good baseline of the game. Again, as long as they come into it with the right mindset. If they're expecting a finished AAA game, it won't be, and they will be disappointed. So it's on us, and particularly on me, to make sure that they understand the mission properly.
Yeah, I understand. And I noticed on the Mavericks website where founders can download the game that the actual download button now says download alpha the Forge. And so would you say that's a sign that Automaton is kind of relenting to a slightly more traditional view of what the Forge actually is? Or do you think, what does that little change reflect?
I think that, so there's a couple of things. I'm glad that you brought up about the website, actually, because so where the founders can download it, adding in that one word makes a sizable amount of difference, because it's what people perceive it. But also beyond that as well, if you go to the website and you're a new founder, a new visitor, you will not actually be given the option to buy a founders pack. You will only be given the option to buy a founders pack if you create an account, and at that point the founders pack is then presented to you. All of these decisions were conscious decisions because of the fact that we decided that we did not want for us to heavily push on we did not heavily want to push on the sales side, because we are trying to make sure that people understand that the game is still early in development. And there have been other incremental changes as well, certain sections of the site where we've really made it clear that this is releasing in full in late 2019. And I think it was said in earlier videos that Automaton as a studio weren't going to adhere to the standard industry terms of alpha and beta, because they weren't, it just wasn't something that the studio was going to adhere to. But the thing is, though, is that we've relented on that, because we've realized that actually people do understand what these terms mean. And the Forge is in an alpha state. It's in an early alpha state, but it's in an alpha state, and that really helps. That being said, I think that there is a wider problem when it comes to early access, because you look at Fortnite, for example, Fortnite still says that it's early access, for example, and that's, a polished AAA game. Yes, it has bugs, but it still says that it's early access. PUBG until very recently did the same thing, I believe, if they're not all still doing it. And these are both situations where people then go, well, this is early access, so for Automaton to put out this game, well, that's not even a game. It's golden. What was it? He said it's GoldenEye on the Nintendo 64. And so we have to be careful of that. And so by us saying and being honest and embracing the fact that this is early and saying this is an alpha, hopefully when people do join, they go, okay, I know what I'm getting myself in for.
Yeah, and so I guess this can become quite a big picture discussion. But how do you think the industry as a whole can solve that problem of having like some games that are like, you could almost say they're actually heading towards the end of their product life cycle, and they still consider themselves maybe to be in early access, and then other games are at the complete other end of the scale, and they're trying to fit in as well. And for the consumer, it makes it really confusing. So, do you think there's a solution to that can from the industry, or how do you solve that problem?
It's a very tough one, and it's a very interesting question because it is so high level. The honest answer is I don't believe that there is an immediate answer that all of this can come under, unless you start implementing a independent watchdog or something similar that instills standards which games need to adhere to. Because then if you were to have an independent set of standards from, again, an ombudsman or whatever you would like to call it, they could then classify games accordingly. I mean, you get certain, in all the different regions, you've got the different organizations that take care of the game's age rating in terms of if it's mature or teen or whatever. Maybe it could be part of their responsibility to determine that as well. But I honestly don't know. It's a very tough situation, and I don't think that's something that's easily going to be answerable. I think it would have to be something that is actually more company-led, and something that is, how do I say, something that is adhered to by the studios themselves, setting themselves to a similar standard. The fact that if they don't, you then get situations like this where Epic have just decided to put a polished AAA game as early access, and that's just ridiculous, because it completely then ruins independent studios who are actually in early access, because it warps the public perception of what the game should be.
Yeah, exactly. And trying to police that, like, the idea of the word ombudsman coming into the industry would probably make quite a few creatives want to throw up. It's
absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely. Because people then go, well, this is my work. And, this is still early access because, especially with some games, Rainbow Six has just celebrated, I think it's 5 years since its release. And they've been doing various bits and pieces. And it might be that Epic have, similar plans where, again, it's going to have a significant life cycle because of the nature of it. GTA, much the same. Again, it's still going so strong. And it's been out for years. I went to the midnight launch of that game for the PlayStation 3. It's that kind of thing. So unless there is going to be this independent body ombudsman, however you would like to call it, I think it's going to be very difficult for that to be instilled. And as you said, I think the industry themselves would rebel against it. So I think it would have to be a collaboration between all major studios, which would then be adhered to by smaller independent studios, for there to be this acceptance of what it is.
Yeah, and so if the studios are doing the expectation setting, for you, bringing it back to Mavericks, how would you like the expectations of those players coming from having signed up at last year's E3 Expo and joining the Forge with the Hunter and Hunted update? Where do you want to see their expectations set? And actually, what do you see their role in the development process as being?
Sure. So the primary function of what these E3 people allow us to do is twofold. One, it allows for us to really be able to test the scale of what we're trying to achieve. Mavericks is incredibly ambitious when it comes to not just the in-game on the Isle of Dern kind of firefights, but also for those that are in the capital, when you're trading with people, and that in-game economy is going to be really fantastic as well. But that only comes with the scale of the player. So that's one thing. The other thing that they offer is they offer another take on the game that is not necessarily from the founders. The game is going to be free to play late this year when it releases in full, and this allows for us to see what that model starts to look like when we bring these people in who haven't had to pay for the game, but then might decide to buy an early access pack, or as it currently stands, a founders pack, at least at this stage, to upgrade their experience of Mavericks. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of the twofold reasons as to what benefits they particularly bring. But in terms of perception and what they should be coming into the game with expectations, the expectation should be that, for one thing, the development cycle and development plan has changed since E3 last year. We've made this abundantly clear in all of the materials that we've prepared for that cohort of players entering the game. So that's one thing.
Yeah.
The second thing that we are doing as well is when they do come in, now that they are aware that the game hopefully is in early access, again, we are positioning that in the best way. Once they do come in, we do want them to appreciate that the game is still ambitious, and that everything that we have said before in terms of the huge social hub, the capital, the significant game like mass scale game modes as well happening on the Isle of Down. All of these things are still heavily expected and are set to come in the next few months. But we need their help to make this achievement be realized. And if they come into it with that mindset of where it is and where it's going to be, they can be so beneficial to what we're trying to achieve. But if they don't come into it and they're expecting the same thing that they saw at E3 last year, then that's going to cause some issues because they will be disappointed.
Yeah, and so specifically, there's two things that you talked about there. One was, what the players are going to pretty much first see as they come into the game, which is the capital, and you also mentioned the idea of the in-game economy. Can you just talk a little bit more about what they should expect as far as, the first thing they see when they drop into the game as far as the capital goes, and what they should expect from the economy side of things when that will come into it, or at least not necessarily dates, but at what point in the development cycle?
Sure. So in terms of, right now the capital is it is a white box. It is a white box environment, which means that areas are blocked out for where there will be textures and additions made. It allows us to map out the area, but without actually adding in any further details at the moment. The reason that we've done that is because of the level of complexity and the scale of what the capital is going to be, with its significant number of different districts, 13. It means that we have to do this in a white box environment for now before we can then build upwards.
Yeah.
The economy at the moment is there isn't one. The economy as it currently stands is that when you have your weaponry, which you extract from the Isle of Down, and you have that in the bank, that in itself is currently where it goes to. You can then use that weaponry to jump back into games, and then extract further weaponry, or of course if you die on the Isle of Down, you'll lose that weaponry that you've taken in with you. But the economy beyond that is non-existent, but we are looking for that to be integrated and implemented, but most likely we are looking at that much closer to the public launch because of the level of complexity that is required for that as well. Because if there's lots of pistol selling, then the price will be determined accordingly, and we need to be aware of that.
Yeah. So I think that spells it out pretty clearly that as far as the capital goes, expect it to be pretty plain, and as far as the economy goes, don't expect anything at this stage, but it will come down the track.
Yes, absolutely. The capital, however, will develop more quickly because that's much more prominent. Obviously, it's the first thing that people will jump into, and there are lots of mechanics that are going to be changing with it as well. So again, at the moment, when players jump into games, they spawn into the capital, they obviously see the pool, they decide to jump in, and that jumping in mechanism, at the moment you're presented with that map where you can choose your tile on the map to be able to spawn from. Again, that will all change. The classic kind of skydiving in and being able to have that dynamic choosing of where you're going to land will be in there. Likewise as well, we are making additions to the pool UI elements when you're in the capital, so that you can see where objectives are, how much longer there is in certain game modes, and so on. And all of this takes work, but these sort of changes will come about much more quickly than these larger scale big ticket items like the economy, for example, which, as I said, will be much closer to public launch.
Yeah, that makes sense. So since the Forge started, I would say on the marketing front, there's been less information overall than we had, say, in the first half of last year. And especially with things like video. So, we had the Making Mavericks series that we ran fairly consistently for a while, and then it kind of, after E3, there were only a handful of episodes. is that something that we can expect to see coming back in again down the track, or what's your sort of overall plans as far as marketing goes into the future?
Sure. So there's a variety of different bits and pieces. I know that the developer diaries, like if we're talking about content creation here, developer diaries were really helpful for a lot of people, and in fact, some people have particularly cited the developer diaries as reasons as to why they bought the game in the first place, because they loved that interaction, that closeness to the actual story behind it and the work going on behind it. We are looking to start them back up. Whether it will be in exactly the same format is still yet to be seen. And timing wise, this will probably be after E3 of this year, just as we prepare for, again, doubling down on the product quality for now before we then start looking at the communication. We have closed down on the communication front, and that's again been a conscious decision because again, from feedback from founders, it's been communicated that there's been, in the past, there was a lot of fluff from the studio. There was content that actually didn't really offer a tremendous amount of benefit to you and the community. And not just that, but also because of the amount of channels we were using at the time, we were using all of the social channels, as well as the Discord and forums. It became very difficult for you to be able, for you as the community, to be able to understand what we were, where was the best place to get the information from. So we have cut back, and that's been a decision based on feedback from you guys. And we are going to look to step up for one thing, the amount of communication we do and the number of channels which we use to communicate that information as the game becomes more public again, towards E3 and so on. And in terms of other content side, the videos is just one aspect. The blog will continue to be somewhere where we will produce long form content so that the community can enjoy that behind the scenes look. But we are making more of a concerted effort to do more video content so that the community who do enjoy absorbing that video content can just see little snippets, 2.5 minute videos of a specific topic. And then if people want to read more, then they have the blog to refer to that as well.
Yeah, to me that sounds like a really good plan. I think, getting the game up to a point where people can come into it and really run with it, and not necessarily think that they have to put a lot of time into helping the development process, by giving feedback. I think at that point, that's probably when, it would be really great to have those development diaries come back in full force again. I personally enjoyed them a lot.
Good. I'm really happy to hear that, because the thing is that, with this right now, especially with that group of founders who are helping the game's development, that, there is so much that we are learning from them. But we also appreciate that right now, a lot of the founders are playing the game because right now you are helping, how do I say it? You are helping grow the game by playing it with the analytics we're understanding from the feedback that you guys are telling us and so on. But also the game just isn't that fun for you at the moment, because it hasn't got the reward mechanics and the retention bits and pieces that will allow you to keep coming back and go, oh, I want to go back in and play Mavericks so I can get to this progression level or whatever. We've added certain bits with that in terms of the in regards to the bits of kit which you can get if you are if you achieve certain levels of reputation, faction reputation. But the thing is, though, is that actually we want to build that out so that there are proper progression mechanics, ranking systems, and so on. More information of all of that will be shared in the next couple of weeks as we go through the armory. And that is what is going to allow you to have a game which you actually go, you know what, this is developing really quite quickly. I am actually enjoying this, and I'm feeling like I'm getting a benefit from coming back to it every time I play.
Yeah, I completely agree, and I can say, I for one, the most time that I've spent recently playing the game was a week or two ago when there was a certain phase that the progression went through where it was easy to progress, and so I played extensively during that because I knew I could progress quickly. And that's kind of changed again, just because the mechanics of the game have been altered a bit. But I think you've hit the nail on the head that when people can progress and they can get rewards for that progression, that'll be one of the key driving forces for people to play, extensively.
Yeah, absolutely. And once those systems come into play, then people feel like, yep, this is a game that I can enjoy. This is a game that I can that I can see myself playing and coming back to time and time again. Whereas, when we launched back in November, it was free for all, and you literally, accumulated you accumulated weaponry, but then it went as soon as you left, and that was kind of it. So the reward loop was really not there.
Yeah.
Now at least there are some additions where, of course, if you win the survival phase when playing the Mavericks game mode, there are some benefits, but still they're quite limited. And there's only so many Barretts or AKs or MP5s that you can bank before you kind of go, yeah, I'm pretty stocked.
Yeah, exactly. And if I compare it to the game that I'm most familiar with, which is Battlefield, for instance, I know if I sit down and play that for 2 or 3 hours, I'll come away from that having earned a few things within the game. And from a progression point of view, you feel like you've actually achieved something. And I think it needs to be on that sort of scale where you sit down for a session and at the end of each session you're going to have achieved something new.
Yes, absolutely. And until we have that, there would, for one thing, from a marketing and promotion standpoint, again, just to bring it back to this, there would be no point for us to do a heavy marketing drive to try and sell the last few remaining founders packs, or indeed to try and drive this user acquisition, because the benefit that there would be little to none, because people would come in, they play the game for an hour and kind of feel empty because there isn't the reward mechanics. So that's one of the other reasons why we're not heavy on the external communication front, at least at the moment.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, Chris, I have one last question. Well, it's kind of a two-part question, and that is, firstly, what's your faction? And the sort of the other part of that question is, when will we have a chance to hop in the game and kill you and James? That's
a really, really good question. So for me, Circle of Lazarus has to be where it's at. For sure, I just love the aesthetics of kind of the faction, so that for me is definitely it. In terms of when you can kill me and James, so we are going to be doing a number of community studio play sessions, especially as we go through with the armory, because we're changing tact and going for a series of themed rapid updates rather than this one kind of one-off update like we did with the Hunter and Hunted. We're going to be looking to do that quite regularly so that we can play and enjoy the new weaponry that's coming into it, and these new other kind of functionality in regards to destruction and so on. So for sure, we'll be in the game quite often in the next few weeks, but we'll be sharing specific information regarding when players can jump in and see members of the studio on, and we'll try and balance it as well so that we're on both the EU and NA servers as well, so that it's not just one side of the pond who gets to enjoy killing members of the studio.
Yeah, that sounds good to me. All right, Chris, thanks for taking the time to talk with me today, and I'd be keen to catch up with you again as the game develops, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you, Rockhand. I really appreciate that, man.
Well, that wraps up this video. Thanks again to Chris-Malby-Tynan for making time in his busy schedule to chat with me. If you found this video helpful, please consider rating with a thumbs up or a thumbs down if you didn't. It all helps. I'm hoping to bring you many more videos about Mavericks when the NDA over the game is lifted, so if you'd like to see those as they arrive, please consider subscribing and hitting that notification bell. Thanks for watching and enjoy the rest of your day.
It's just the night.